Sometimes a woman has to break in half before she discovers the side of herself that never bends. That was the sentence that kept echoing in my head as I woke up in the hospital, groggy, hurting, and confused. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The room smelled like antiseptic and cheap coffee. My throat felt dry like I'd swallowed dust. And right beside me stood a doctor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a voice so soft it made me uneasy. He leaned close and whispered, "Your husband told us not to tell you who called." Those words sliced through me. At first, I thought I misheard him. I blinked, tried to focus, tried to remember why I was even here. I'd collapsed at work. Stress, they said. Exhaustion. Maybe that was true, but it wasn't the whole story. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice scraping. He cleared his throat, suddenly formal, suddenly distant. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. Please rest." And then he left the room as if he'd already said too much. My heart thudded. Why would my husband of 23 years, tell the hospital not to tell me who called? Who even called? Who cared enough to ask about me, but wasn't allowed to reach me? My stomach sank. I already knew. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew. But I wasn't ready to face it yet. A nurse walked in next. A young woman, maybe 27, scrolling her tablet. I asked, "Did someone call for me?" She hesitated. Just a flicker, but I caught it. "Ma'am, your emergency contact is your husband. We notified him." "I'm not asking about him," I said quietly. She froze. Then she looked down at her screen and murmured, "I'm sorry. I can't share that information. Your husband made certain notes." Certain notes. The humiliation hit like a punch. Like I was a child. Like I had no right to know who cared if I lived or died. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was clarity, the sharp kind that burns. I remembered the woman I used to be. 45, working 2 jobs so he could figure out his business idea. Paying the bills. Cooking dinner even after 12-hour shifts. Smiling at his family gatherings while he bragged about things he never did. I thought loyalty guaranteed loyalty. I thought love meant patience. I thought sacrifice brought safety. But lying in that bed, with machines beeping beside me, it hit me. I had given him everything, my youth, my energy, my trust. And in return, he was giving me secrets. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. Dead. Of course it was. The nurse offered to plug it in. When it powered on, the lock screen exploded with missed notifications, none from him. But one text preview caught my eye. It was from an unsaved number. It said, "I tried to check on you. He blocked me." My breath caught. The room tilted. Whoever messaged me wasn't a stranger. They knew exactly what my husband was capable of. And my husband, my partner, my confidant, had worked fast to make sure I stayed isolated and uninformed. Suddenly everything sharpened. The late-night work calls. The sudden changes in his schedule. The way he guarded his phone like it was a newborn. I wasn't imagining it. Something was wrong. And for the first time in years, I felt anger instead of fear. I pressed the nurse button. She arrived, cheerful, unsuspecting. "I want my discharge papers," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Not this time. Ma'am, you really should rest. I'm going home." I didn't know what I'd find there. But I knew one thing. I wasn't collapsing again. Not because of him. Something inside me was waking up, slow, steady, powerful. The part of me he hadn't managed to silence. The nurse kept insisting I needed rest, but I'd already made up my mind. "Please bring me the discharge forms," I repeated, slow and steady, the way you speak when you're done explaining yourself. Something changed in her eyes. A shift. A realization. She nodded. When she left, the room felt colder, quieter, sharper. The kind of silence that forces you to think. And thinking hurt more than any needle in my arm. I stared at the wall and whispered to myself, 23 years. And this is where we are. A hospital transporter rolled me out in a wheelchair, even though I insisted I was fine. Rules, apparently. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Every step of that corridor felt like walking out of the life I had been pretending to live. When the sliding doors opened and the cool air hit my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Awareness. The kind of awareness that comes when a woman finally stops lying to herself. I ordered an Uber. I didn't call my husband. I didn't want to hear his voice. Not yet. The driver was a middle-aged woman with a soft voice and tired eyes. She looked at me through the mirror. "Tough day?" she asked gently. I almost broke. Right there. But I swallowed it down. "We'll see," I muttered. I looked out the window as the houses passed. Little porches, American flags, lawns covered in leaves, a couple walking their dog. Everything so normal, and yet my world felt like it had a fault line running right down the middle. My phone buzzed. A message from that same unknown number. "Are you okay? Please answer. I'm worried." I didn't reply. Not yet. But the worry in their message told me something. They weren't casual. They weren't accidental. They knew me. They cared. And my husband didn't want them anywhere near me. When I opened the front door, the house felt unfamiliar. Like I'd been gone longer than a night. His shoes were by the door, neatly placed like always. The TV was on low volume in the living room. Some documentary he always pretended to understand. I dropped my bag on the counter and waited. He appeared from the hallway, startled. "Jesus, Mary, why didn't you call? I was going to come get you." He rushed toward me, arms half open, face arranged into concern. But I wasn't the same woman who collapsed yesterday. I stepped back. "I wanted to come home quietly," I said. He blinked. One of those tight blinks he does when he's recalculating. "I'm just glad you're okay." His voice was soft. Too soft. The kind of soft people use when they're hiding something behind their teeth. I walked past him and headed to the bedroom. He followed. Too closely. "Did the hospital say anything important?" he asked casually. The question hit me like a cold splash. He wasn't asking out of concern. He was fishing. Testing. I kept my back turned as I pulled off my jacket. "They said I need rest." "That's it." His voice tightened. I turned and looked him dead in the eyes. "They also said someone called." His face didn't freeze completely. He was too practiced for that. But something slipped. A muscle near his jaw twitched. "Oh, who?" he asked lightly. "You tell me," I said. He forced a laugh. "How would I know? They only contacted me." He was lying. I could feel it the way you feel a storm coming through your bones. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at him. "Did you tell the hospital not to share information with me?" His expression stiffened, just for a split second. But it was enough. "Mary, they must have misunderstood." "I didn't ask what they misunderstood," I said quietly. "I asked what you did." His nostrils flared. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. That was the moment I knew the truth was even uglier than I imagined. Someone had called. Someone he didn't want me to know about. And he was ready to lie straight to my face about it. I stood up. Enough pretending. Enough hoping. Enough forgiving what wasn't accidental. "I need a shower," I said. It wasn't really about the shower. It was about space. About grounding myself before the confrontation I knew was coming. When I closed the bathroom door, I didn't cry. I looked in the mirror. My hospital bracelet still around my wrist. My eyes swollen but steady. And I whispered, "This ends now." The shower was hot, almost scalding, but it didn't burn away the anger. It only made it sharper. The steam filled the bathroom, wrapping me like a cocoon, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, clarity. Clarity meant I could see what he had been doing. The lies. The secrecy. The control. 23 years of my life, filtered through someone else's selfish choices. And now, he thought I was still the same woman who would silently forgive. I got out of the shower, wrapped myself in a towel, and stared at my reflection. My hair was damp, clinging to my neck. My eyes were red but fierce. This was the face of someone who would not bend anymore. Someone who would not shrink. Someone who would demand the truth. I dressed carefully in my favorite jeans and a loose blouse. Nothing fancy. This wasn't about impressing anyone. It was armor. I walked to the bedroom, phone in hand. The unsaved number had texted again. "Please call me. You need to hear this." I hesitated. My husband was sitting on the edge of the bed, pretending to read the newspaper. The corners of his mouth twitching with that faint arrogance that always made my stomach twist. "Mary," he said softly, "you need to relax. You've been through a lot." I took a deep breath, measuring my words. "I'm done relaxing. I'm done trusting you without proof. I want answers." His face froze, a twitch in his jaw giving him away. He tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "I want to know who called the hospital yesterday. And I want the truth." He laughed softly, a short, defensive sound. "Mary, it's nothing. Really. Just someone checking on you. Nothing to worry about." I felt a fire ignite inside me. "Nothing to worry about?" I repeated louder. "You blocked them from speaking to me. You lied to the hospital. And now you expect me to believe it's nothing." He shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated," he mumbled. "Complicated?" I said. You've been lying for years. Don't try to gaslight me now." He didn't answer. He couldn't. And that silence was more powerful than any argument. I grabbed my bag from the floor and went to my desk. I needed evidence. Bank statements, emails, phone records. Anything that could show what he had been hiding. I started making lists, writing down every suspicious moment I remembered, every lie he had told. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming control. About taking my life back, piece by piece, from someone who had been quietly dismantling it. I realized that night, sitting in the quiet of my own apartment while he watched TV obliviously, that I had a choice. I could continue to be small, quiet, and manipulated, or I could fight. And fight I would. For the first time, I felt hope, not fragile, not tentative, but solid. The storm was coming, and I would not run from it. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The air in my apartment felt different, sharper, heavier, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. I didn't sit in bed scrolling through my phone or waiting for him to speak. I moved. I acted. First, I called a lawyer I had once met through a friend, a woman named Diane, sharp, efficient, no nonsense. When I explained the situation in pieces, careful but firm, Diane didn't blink. She said, "Mary, the first step is evidence. Everything. Every call, every text, every bank record. Then we plan. We make sure he doesn't have the chance to manipulate you again." I hung up and felt a rush of energy. This was tangible. Real. It was the first time in weeks I felt I had a map out of the chaos my life had become. I spent the next few hours methodically combing through old emails, phone bills, and even some hidden apps on my phone I hadn't noticed before. Every time I found a strange message, a deleted email, or an unexplained bank transaction, my chest tightened, but not with fear. With confirmation. I discovered that he had been siphoning money into a separate account for months, keeping it hidden. I found messages from people I recognized, carefully deleted from his phone, but traces remained. Someone had tried to reach me, and he had intercepted them. And all those years, I thought I was safe. Thought I could trust him. Thought my life was ours together. It wasn't. I took pictures of statements, screenshots of messages, and wrote everything down. I documented dates, times, names. My notes were messy but precise. They were my first weapon. That evening, I brought everything into the living room. He was cooking dinner. Something simple, pasta, his favorite. He looked up when I walked in, expecting smiles, apologies, maybe a small reassurance that everything was normal. Instead, I sat across from him, my folder open, and said, "We need to talk. And this time, I want honesty." He froze. Just for a second. But it was enough to know I had unsettled him. I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly. I didn't flinch. "I have messages. Bank records. Texts intercepted. You blocked someone from seeing me when I was in the hospital. And you lied to the staff. All of it." He swallowed. His fork trembled in his hand. "Mary, it's not like that." "Stop," I interrupted, calm but firm. "Not one excuse. Not one justification. I just want the truth." His eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. He opened his mouth again and hesitated. The silence stretched thick, uncomfortable, and then he closed his mouth. He had no words. For the first time in years, I realized I was no longer afraid. I sat there, letting him squirm under my gaze. For 23 years, I had let fear control me. Fear of confrontation, fear of loneliness, fear of his manipulation. Not anymore. I closed the folder, slid it toward him. "This is your chance. You can tell me everything now, or it's all coming out through Diane." The look in his eyes was priceless. Panic, guilt, recognition that I had changed. And I felt it. The surge of strength a woman feels when she finally stops running. He sat there, frozen, staring at the folder like it was a bomb. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. I just let the silence stretch, heavy and accusing. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, hesitant. "Mary, okay, maybe I messed up. I didn't mean. I just..." "Stop," I said firmly, cutting him off. "No more words that twist into excuses. Say exactly what you did." He swallowed. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if for the first time. "I blocked the call. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I was protecting you," he said. I stared at him. My body was calm, but my mind was racing. Protecting me? By keeping me in the dark? By lying to the hospital? By lying to me for years? He flinched. For once, the power dynamic had shifted. I thought I was helping, he stammered. You thought you knew better than me about my own life, I said. For 23 years, you decided what I could and couldn't know, what I could and couldn't see. And you think a word like helping erases that? He didn't answer. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had planned this. Every step from the hospital to the lawyer to the folder on the table had been deliberate. I wasn't here to argue about feelings. I was here to reclaim my life. I've contacted Diane, I said. She knows everything. She's already prepared. And I'm not afraid anymore. You don't get to hide behind your charm or your explanations. He looked at me, eyes wide, lips trembling. For once, I saw fear mirrored back at me. It was unfamiliar and satisfying in a quiet, righteous way. I didn't mean. Stop, I said again. You didn't mean anything. Intentions don't erase actions. Lies erase trust. Control erases love. And now, I decide what happens next. He didn't respond. He couldn't. That night, I called Diane. We went over everything, emails, phone records, bank statements, the intercepted call from the hospital. She assured me that the first step was to secure my finances, then confront him legally, and finally ensure that anyone trying to contact me wouldn't be blocked again. It felt empowering. Every small action, locking my own accounts, documenting lies, preparing evidence, was reclaiming pieces of my life that had been quietly stolen. I realized how easy it had been for him to manipulate me for years, not because I was weak, but because I had trusted blindly. Now that trust was gone, but not replaced by bitterness. Replaced by vigilance. Replaced by clarity. Replaced by a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in decades. The next morning, he tried to act casual again, sipping his coffee, pretending everything was normal. I didn't participate. I watched. I took notes silently in my mind, every twitch, every hesitation. Finally, I said, Enough. We're going to deal with this. I don't care how you spin it. I have everything I need. You will tell me the truth, or Diane will handle it. He looked at me, defeated. For the first time, he realized that I was no longer the woman he could control. And I felt it, pure, unshakable power. The days that followed were tense, quiet, but charged. I moved deliberately through my home, checking locks, organizing documents, making sure everything I might need was in my control. I didn't speak unless necessary. He didn't speak unless pressed. Silence became our battleground. I contacted the unknown caller, the person my husband had blocked. Their voice on the phone was cautious, kind, and urgent. I'm glad you called back, they said. I tried to reach you at the hospital, but he blocked me. I felt anger rise, sharp and immediate. So you know everything? I asked. Yes, they said softly. I've been worried. I couldn't believe he would. I cut them off. I know. I want to know everything you know. Every detail. Over the next hour, I listened, taking notes, asking questions, piecing together the puzzle my husband had tried so hard to hide. Names. Dates. Messages intercepted. Everything. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Preparation. Not chaos. Not fear. Preparedness. That evening, I sat across from him at the kitchen table. The folder lay open between us. I was calm, measured, focused. You've been hiding things from me for years, I said. Not just yesterday. Not just this hospital call. Everything. I have proof. He didn't look up. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Mary, it wasn't personal, he said quietly. I laughed softly, bitterly. Not personal? My life is personal. My trust is personal. My health, my friends, my finances, they're all personal. And you decided they weren't. He opened his mouth, but I stopped him with a hand. Don't. Just listen. This is your chance to tell the truth. Every detail. Or Diane will handle it. I don't care which. You can't manipulate this anymore. The weight in the room shifted. He realized he had no cards left. I had them all. Over the next few days, I moved quietly but decisively. I secured my accounts, changed passwords, documented every lie, and made calls to friends and family he had tried to isolate me from. Each action felt like stitching my life back together, one thread at a time. And I noticed something. With each small act of reclaiming my autonomy, I felt lighter, stronger, unafraid. The woman in the mirror, the one with swollen eyes, hospital bracelet still faintly on her wrist, was gone. She had been replaced by someone deliberate, vigilant, and unafraid. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. That evening, he approached me, voice quiet and tentative. Mary, maybe we can talk? I looked at him without flinching. Yes, I said. We can talk. On my terms. I've spent decades making excuses for you. Not anymore. And I felt it, real, undeniable power. The power that comes not from revenge, but from reclaiming your dignity, your life, your voice. For the first time in years, I slept that night feeling like me again. Not someone controlled, silenced, or manipulated. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet, almost eerily so. My husband had left for work, but the calm didn't feel fragile. It felt like an ally. I moved through the kitchen, making coffee, my movements deliberate, confident. I was no longer waiting for permission to exist. I spent the morning drafting a detailed timeline. Every lie, every intercepted call, every hidden bank transfer. I printed copies, organized them, and labeled each piece clearly. Diane had advised me, clarity is power. And I felt it. Every page, every note was a piece of armor. By noon, I was ready. He came home, expecting the usual routine, the same tension he'd grown accustomed to controlling. I was waiting in the living room, calm, folder in hand. Mary, he began, seeing the set of my jaw, the fire in my eyes. This ends today, I said firmly. I've documented everything. Your lies, your manipulations, everything. I'm done letting you control me. He hesitated. Then, in that familiar, desperate tone, he said, maybe we can work this out. No, I interrupted, steady, unwavering. There is nothing to work out. There is truth to acknowledge and consequences to face. That's all. For the first time, he seemed small. The arrogance, the charm, the deflections, they were gone. He realized I was no longer afraid, no longer bending, no longer trapped by years of silent compromise. He tried one last maneuver, guilt. Mary, I've done so much for you. I provided, I protected. Provided. I laughed, bitterly but controlled. You provided lies. You protected your secrets. That is not protection. That is control. He clenched his fists, frustration visible, but I didn't flinch. I was calm. Every emotion churning inside me was now focused. Strength, clarity, determination. He tried again, more subtly this time. People make mistakes. Can't you forgive? I shook my head. This isn't about forgiveness anymore. It's about truth. And I will not shrink for your comfort. Finally, he fell silent. And in that silence, I felt it, the shift. The moment when someone realizes they can no longer manipulate you, that the control they relied on for decades is gone. I realized then that justice doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, methodical, precise, a reclaiming of one's life, step by step, with unwavering dignity. I had reached that point. I wasn't fighting to hurt him. I was fighting to free myself, from fear, from lies, from manipulation. Sitting there, watching him squirm under the weight of truth, I felt the woman I had been slipping away, the scared, compliant version. And I welcomed the woman I had become, strong, fearless, and fully aware of her worth. The next morning, I woke up with a calm I hadn't known for decades. The apartment was quiet, my husband gone for work, but the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like space finally cleared for me. Space to think, to breathe, to reclaim what had been stolen. I reviewed my folder one last time. Emails, messages, bank records, notes from conversations. Every piece told the same story. Lies, manipulation, betrayal. But now these weren't chains. They were evidence, a record of my awakening. I no longer felt trapped. I felt empowered. When he returned that evening, I was waiting in the living room. He sensed something had shifted. There was no fear in my posture, no hesitation in my gaze. Mary, he began, voice cautious. This ends tonight, I said firmly, placing the folder on the table. Everything you've hidden, everything you've manipulated, I know. And I will not allow it to continue. He tried his old tactics, charm, excuses, guilt. But they no longer worked. Each attempt bounced off my armor of clarity and strength. I let him speak, let him stumble, let him feel the weight of truth pressing down. Finally, he fell silent. No deflection, no excuse, no charm. Just silence. And in that silence, I realized something profound. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer small. I was free. The following days were deliberate. I contacted Diane, made legal arrangements, and ensured my finances were secure. I reached out to friends and family I had been isolated from, reconnecting with people who reminded me of who I really was. Each step was small, but cumulative. They were threads stitching back the life I had almost lost. Every call I answered, Every email I read, every decision I made reinforced the truth. My life was mine. No one could dictate it. No one could silence me. No one could diminish my value. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker across the streets. My hands were steady, my mind quiet. I thought about the hospital room, about the whispered words that started this journey, and I smiled softly. Sometimes you have to be hidden, silenced, and betrayed to find your true voice. Sometimes you have to be broken to see the strength you never knew existed. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. The woman who had trusted blindly, who had sacrificed endlessly, who had been humiliated and deceived, she was still here. But she was stronger, wiser, untouchable in her dignity. I whispered to myself, "This is my life, my choices, my truth, and no one will take that away again." If you were in my place, what would you have done? Write it in the comments.